She didn't know it was the last night she would ever feel invisible. She didn't know that the borrowed dress, a whisper of silver-gray silk that felt like a shroud, was the last garment of her old life. She didn't know that the man watching her from the shadows of the royal dais was not just another lord, but the king himself, a man who had refused 17 of the realm's most beautiful and powerful daughters before the first candle had been lit. Alara only knew the familiar ache in her soul, a hollow space carved out by years of quiet endurance. The grand ballroom of the Ethelgard Palace was a constellation of glittering stars, and she was a speck of dust, pulled into its orbit against her will. Crystal chandeliers dripped honeyed light onto a sea of swirling jewel tones. Emerald green velvet, sapphire blue satin, and ruby red silk gowns whispered secrets as they passed. The air, thick with the cloying sweetness of 100 different perfumes and the sharp tang of spiced wine, felt heavy in her lungs. She stood near a marble column, its cold surface a small comfort against her back. It was solid. It was real. Unlike her, it had a right to take up space. "Do try not to look like a frightened mouse, Alara." A voice, sharp and saccharine, cut through the din. Her stepsister, Seraphina, materialized beside her, a vision in crimson that seemed to suck all the color from Alara's world. Her smile was a knife wrapped in silk. "Mother insisted you come, but she didn't insist you embarrass us." Alara kept her eyes on the swirling dancers, their laughter like the shattering of glass. "I am not doing anything, Seraphina." "Exactly," Seraphina hissed, her fan snapping shut with a sound like a breaking bone. "You are a void. A little gray. Nothing in the corner. At least have the decency to pretend you are enjoying the king's hospitality." Her stepmother, Lady Isolde, approached from the other side, her presence a wave of icy disapproval. She was a woman carved from glacial ice, all sharp angles and chilling beauty. "Seraphina is right. Straighten your spine. You look like a servant who has wandered into the wrong room. Remember why we are here. The king must choose a bride tonight, and Seraphina has been favored with the first dance." Alara's gaze drifted to the dais, where a throne of dark, polished wood sat empty. The king, it was said, preferred to walk among his people. A rumor she found difficult to believe. Power did not walk. It sat and commanded. She had not even seen him. Not that it mattered. He was a creature from another world, a sun around which they all revolved, while she was a forgotten moon, reflecting no light of her own. Her family had brought her for one reason, to serve as a drab backdrop against which Seraphina's vibrant beauty could shine all the brighter. She was a prop in their grand performance. "Yes, mother," Alara murmured, the words tasting like ash. She straightened her spine as commanded, but the effort felt monumental. The simple gray dress, a hand-me-down from a distant cousin, felt coarse against her skin. It had no jewels, no intricate embroidery. It was the color of twilight, of things ending. From across the room, hidden in an alcove draped with midnight blue velvet, King Lysander watched. He had seen Seraphina's cruel smile and the flicker of pain in the gray girl's eyes. He had seen her straighten her spine not in obedience, but in a silent act of defiance that no one else seemed to notice. He was so tired. Tired of the simpering smiles, the calculated glances, the ambitious parents parading their daughters like prize mares. He had seen 17 of them already tonight. Each one was a perfect doll of nobility, their words polished, their movements graceful, their souls utterly, devastatingly empty. They saw his crown, not the man. They saw his power, not his weariness. But this girl, this quiet shadow by the pillar, she was different. She was not performing. She was enduring. There was a strength in her stillness that was more compelling than all the dramatic flourishes of the other women combined. She was like a moth that had wandered into a gathering of butterflies, possessing a subtle, dusty beauty they could never comprehend. A strange feeling, one he hadn't felt in years, stirred in his chest. It was a pull, a silver thread unspooling from his heart and tethering itself to her. He felt as though he had been standing in a room full of noise his entire life, and he had just heard, for the very first time, a single, perfect note of music. He had to know her. Ilara felt a sudden warmth prickle across her skin, a sensation so alien it made her flinch. It was as if a sliver of sunlight had pierced the ballroom's artificial glow and found her. And only her. She scanned the crowd, her heart giving a nervous flutter. Her eyes met a pair of dark, intense ones across the room. A man stood there, half hidden by the velvet curtains of an alcove. He was tall, broader than any man she had ever seen, dressed in a simple tunic of the deepest black, unadorned with the gaudy jewels and medals the other lords favored. Yet, he wore the absence of decoration like a suit of armor. Power radiated from him, a quiet, immense gravity that bent the room around him. His hair was as black as a raven's wing, and his jaw was set with a severity that was both intimidating and impossibly handsome. And he was looking directly at her. It was not the leering gaze of the other men, nor the dismissive glance she usually received. This was different. It was a look of such focused intensity it felt like a physical touch. It was a look of recognition, as if he had been searching for her. Her breath caught. A blush, hot and unwelcome, crept up her neck. She quickly looked away, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. It was a mistake, a trick of the light. A man like that would never look at a girl like her. But when she dared to glance back, he was still there. And he was moving. The crowd parted for him. It was not a polite shifting, it was an instinctual retreat, a sea of silk and jewels receding from an unstoppable tide. Whispers followed in his wake, a ripple of sound that seemed to chase him across the marble floor. He ignored them all. His dark eyes never left her. Close enough now. He was even taller up close, a mountain of a man who blocked out the light and noise of the rest of the world. The air around him seemed to crackle with energy. He smelled of cedar and cold night air, a clean, wild scent that cut through the cloying perfumes of the ballroom. He stopped before her. The world went silent. Serafina and her mother had frozen, their mouths slightly agape. They stared at the man, then at Ilara, their expressions a mixture of confusion and fury. Who was this lord to ignore a beauty like Serafina for a drab little mouse? The man's voice, when he spoke, was exactly as she would have imagined. It was deep, a low rumble that vibrated through the floor, like gravel wrapped in velvet. "What is your name?" It was not a request. It was a demand, yet it was not unkind. It was simply certain, as if the answer was his by right. Ilara found her voice, though it was a mere thread of sound. "Ilara. Ilara," he repeated, and the way he said it made her name sound like something precious, a secret, a prayer. He looked into her eyes and she felt stripped bare, as if he could see every scar, every hidden fear, every tiny, flickering hope she kept locked away. "Why are you hiding in the shadows, Ilara?" The question was so direct, so honest, that the truth fell from her lips before she could stop it. "Because that is where I belong." A flicker of something, anger, pain, crossed his face. It was there and gone in an instant. "No," he said, his voice dropping even lower, a private thunder meant only for her. "You do not." He extended a hand. It was large and calloused, a warrior's hand, not a courtier's. It was a hand that could wield a sword or cradle a broken bird with equal care. "Dance with me." The world, which had been holding its breath, gasped. Serafina's face contorted with pure, venomous rage. Her moment, her night, was being stolen by the gray nothing beside her. "She does not dance," Lady Isolde snapped, stepping forward. "She is unwell." The man's gaze slid to her stepmother, and the temperature in the air dropped by 20 degrees. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The sheer force of his will was a physical blow. "I was not speaking to you." Lady Isolde recoiled as if struck. He turned his attention back to Alara, his eyes softening almost imperceptibly. His hand was still outstretched. An offer, a lifeline, an escape. For the first time in her life, Alara made a choice for herself. Her small, trembling hand rose and settled into his palm. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. A jolt of electricity shot up her arm, a current of life she hadn't felt in a decade. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. He led her onto the dance floor. The music, a soft, melancholic waltz, swelled to fill the sudden silence. The other dancers melted away, clearing a space in the center of the vast room, leaving them utterly alone in a sea of stunned faces. He pulled her gently into his arms. One hand rested firmly on the small of her back, the other held her hand as if it were the most fragile thing in the world. She was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest and see the flecks of gold in his dark, stormy eyes. "You are trembling," he murmured, his voice a low vibration against her ear. I am not a very good dancer," she confessed, her eyes fixed on the starched white of his collar. "Then I will hold you steady," he promised. And he did. He began to move, guiding her with an effortless grace that belied his size. Her feet, which had always felt clumsy and awkward, suddenly knew the steps. He moved, and she followed, a perfect mirror. The world narrowed to the circle of his arms, to the steady beat of his heart against hers, to the hypnotic rhythm of the music. The staring eyes, the whispers, her stepmother's murderous glare. It all faded into a distant, meaningless blur. For 3 glorious minutes, she was not invisible. She was the only thing in the world. When the music ended, the silence that followed was deafening. He did not release her. His hand remained at her back, a warm, protective brand. "Come with me," he said softly. It was not a question. It was a continuation. He was not finished with her yet. Without a backward glance at her sputtering, furious family, she let him lead her from the dance floor, through a set of tall glass doors, and out onto a deserted stone balcony. The cool night air was a welcome relief, washing away the stifling heat of the ballroom. Below them, a vast manicured garden slept under a blanket of moonlight, the air fragrant with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Silver light dusted the marble balustrade and caught in the dark silk of his hair. He finally released her hand, though he remained close, his presence a shield against the rest of the world. She wrapped her arms around herself, a familiar, protective gesture. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chirping of crickets. "Why me?" He leaned against the balustrade, his powerful frame silhouetted against the starry sky. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "Because you are the only real person in that room." The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. Real? She had never felt less real in her entire life. She was a ghost, a shadow, a reflection of other people's desires and disappointments. "You are mistaken," she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. "I am nobody, a footnote in my stepsister's story. They only brought me tonight to make her look more beautiful by comparison." The confession hung in the air between them, ugly and raw. She expected him to pity her, or worse, to agree with her. Instead, his expression hardened. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "They are fools," he said, the words sharp and cold. To have a diamond in their possession and mistake it for common stone. Her heart stuttered. No one had ever spoken of her like that. No one had ever looked at her with anything other than disappointment or disdain. This man, This powerful, mysterious stranger saw something in her that she herself had long forgotten existed. "You don't even know me," she whispered, tears pricking the backs of her eyes. "I know your strength," he countered, his voice softening again. "I saw it when your sister spoke to you. You did not crumble. You endured. I know your grace. I felt it when we danced. And I know your heart, Ilara. I saw it in your eyes the moment I looked at you. It is a kind heart. And a lonely one." A single tear escaped and traced a cold path down her cheek. He reached out, his thumb gently brushing it away. His touch was electric, sending a shiver through her entire body. It was a touch that healed more than it soothed. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice thick with unshed emotion. He watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Then he straightened up, a subtle shift that somehow made him seem even more imposing. He extended his right hand, turning it so the moonlight caught the heavy gold ring on his finger. Etched into the dark stone was the royal crest of Ethelgard, the snarling direwolf, the sigil of the king. The world tilted on its axis. The air rushed from her lungs. The man who had held her, who had spoken to her with such raw intimacy, was not a lord. He was King Lysander, the king who was meant to be choosing a bride, the king who was meant to be dancing with her sister. Her blood ran cold. She took an involuntary step back, her hand flying to her mouth. This was a disaster, a terrible, catastrophic mistake. She had been familiar with the king. She had let him see her weakness. Her family would be apoplectic. She would be ruined. "Your Majesty," she breathed, sinking into a clumsy curtsy. "Forgive me. I did not know." He closed the distance between them in a single stride, his hands catching her by the elbows and lifting her back to her feet. His grip was firm but gentle. "Do not," he commanded, his voice a low growl. "Do not ever bow to me." He searched her face, his dark eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't name. It looked like desperation. It looked like hope. "Your fear," he said, his voice rough, "is it of me or of my crown?" I don't know," she stammered, overwhelmed. "It is too much. You are the king, and I am nothing." "Stop saying that," he said, his voice fierce, possessive. "You are not nothing. You are everything. You are the answer to a question I forgot I was asking. I have spent my life surrounded by echoes, Ilara. Tonight, for the first time, I heard a voice." He was so close now. His hands moved from her elbows to cup her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His gaze was so intense it felt like it was branding her very soul. He was looking at her as if she were a long-lost treasure he had finally found. Before she could process what was happening, the doors to the balcony burst open. "There you are!" Lady Isolda's voice was a screech of fury. She stormed onto the balcony, Serafina trailing behind her, her face a mask of thunderous rage. "Unhand her at once! Do you have any idea who you are speaking to, you insolent girl?" Then her eyes fell on the king, on his hands, cupping her stepdaughter's face, on the unmistakable royal signet on his finger. Lady Isolda's tirade died in her throat, replaced by a choked gasp. Her face, which had been red with anger, turned a pasty, sickly white. Serafina froze, her jaw slack with disbelief. Ilara tried to pull away, mortified, but Lysander's hands held her fast. He did not even turn to look at her family. His eyes remained locked on hers, a silent promise passing between them. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned his head to face the two women. The sheer, untamed power that rolled off him was suffocating. "You were saying, Lady Isolda?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. It was the calm of a storm gathering on the horizon. Lady Isolda fell into a deep, trembling curtsy, pulling a stunned Serafina down with her. "Your Majesty, 1,000 pardons. We did not realize. We were simply concerned for Alara's welfare. Lysander's laugh was a short, harsh sound devoid of any humor. It cut sharper than any blade. Your concern is touching, but misplaced. He took Alara's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. He held it up for them to see, a clear, unmistakable gesture of possession, of choice. "Let me be perfectly clear," he said, his voice ringing with absolute authority, echoing in the sudden, vast silence of the night. "This woman, whom you have treated with such casual cruelty, is under my protection now." He took a step forward, pulling Alara with him, positioning her slightly behind him as if to shield her. He looked down at the two kneeling women, his face a mask of cold fury. "I have been watching you tonight. I have heard your whispers. I have seen your contempt. You brought this jewel here and tried to hide her in the dust, hoping no one would see her shine." His gaze flickered to Seraphina, whose face was now stained with tears of humiliation. "You thought to offer me a gaudy piece of glass, when a flawless diamond stood beside you." He turned and led Alara back into the ballroom. The music had stopped. Every single person in the vast hall was standing frozen, their eyes wide with shock, watching the scene unfold. Lady Isolde and Seraphina scrambled to their feet and followed, their faces a mixture of terror and disbelief. "Your Majesty, there must be a misunderstanding," Lady Isolde cried, her voice cracking. "Alara is... she is simple. She is not of noble blood on her mother's side. She is not fit." Lysander stopped in the center of the room. He turned, his movements slow and deliberate. The entire court held its breath. "She is fit to be my queen," he declared, his voice booming through the hall. A royal decree that would be recorded in the history books. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. "Her bloodline does not matter to me," he continued, his eyes sweeping over the stunned faces of his court, a silent warning to them all. "Her heart does, her strength does, her kindness does. Qualities that seem to be in short supply in this room." He turned his gaze back to Alara's family. The contempt in his eyes was so profound it was a physical force, making them both flinch. "You will leave this palace, now, and you will not speak to Alara again. Any disrespect shown to her, from this moment forward, will be considered an act of treason against the crown. Against me." Lady Isolde looked as though she might faint. Seraphina let out a choked sob. Their world, their ambitions, their social standing had been utterly annihilated in the space of 5 minutes. Defeated and humiliated beyond measure, they turned and fled, a wake of shocked whispers following their retreat. The room was silent. Lysander turned back to Alara. The fury in his face melted away, replaced by a look of such profound tenderness that it made her knees weak. The entire world was watching them, but he looked at her as if they were the only two people alive. "I am sorry you had to endure that," he said, his voice soft again, meant only for her. You called me your queen," she whispered, her mind reeling. "I did," he confirmed, a small, gentle smile touching his lips for the first time. It transformed his severe face, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. "Was I wrong?" She could not speak. She could only stare at him, her heart a chaotic symphony in her chest. Hope, terrifying and brilliant, was blooming within her, unfurling its petals after a long, cold winter. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. Then he lowered his head, his gaze never leaving hers, and he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was acclaiming, fierce and deep, and full of all the unspoken words that had passed between them. It was a promise of protection, of devotion, of a future she had never, in her wildest dreams, dared to imagine. It tasted of cedar and wine and the beginning of a new world. When he finally pulled away, the ballroom erupted into applause. It was hesitant at first, then grew into a thunderous roar of approval and celebration. But Alara heard none of it. She only heard the steady, reassuring beat of his heart. She only saw the man who had looked into the shadows and seen not a nothing, but a queen. He led her away from the noise, his hand securely in hers, guiding her through gilded hallways and up a winding staircase. They walked in a comfortable silence, the chaos of the ballroom fading behind them. He brought her to a set of large oak doors, which he pushed open to reveal his private study. The room was the complete opposite of the ostentatious ballroom. It was warm and lived in. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, crammed with leather-bound volumes. A fire crackled merrily in a large stone hearth, casting a warm, dancing glow over plush velvet armchairs and a heavy mahogany desk. The air smelled of old paper, wood smoke, and beeswax. It was a sanctuary, a place of peace. He led her to one of the armchairs by the fire and gently pushed her down into it. He knelt before her, still holding her hand, his expression serious. "Ilara," he began, his voice low and earnest. "I know this is sudden. I know it is overwhelming. What I said out there, I meant every word. I will not force you into anything, but I need you to know that my offer was not a whim. It was not a grand gesture to spite your family." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "For years, my life has been a duty, a cage, albeit a gilded one. I have been surrounded by people, but I have been utterly alone. They all want something from the king. No one has ever simply seen the man. Until tonight. When I looked at you, I felt seen. And I saw you, Ilara. Truly saw you." She looked into his eyes, and she saw the truth of his words. She saw the loneliness he spoke of, a shadow that even his immense power could not vanquish. And she saw in his gaze the reflection of a woman she didn't recognize. Someone strong, someone worthy, someone cherished. "I am afraid," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be a queen." "You already are," he said with unshakable conviction. "You are kind, you are resilient, you are honest. That is all a queen needs to be. All I need you to be is you. The rest, we will learn together." He reached into his tunic and pulled out a simple, delicate chain. Hanging from it was a small, exquisitely carved wooden bird, its wings outstretched in flight. "My mother gave this to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She told me to give it to the woman who would not be caged by my crown, but who would teach my heart to fly with hers. I have kept it for 20 years, waiting." With gentle fingers, he fastened the chain around her neck. The smooth wood was warm against her skin. "Ilara," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Marry me. Be my wife, my partner, my queen. Fill this silent castle with your light. Please." The last word was a plea, raw and vulnerable. It was the king of Ethelgard, the most powerful man in the realm, on his knees, asking her for something. The last of her fear washed away, replaced by a wave of certainty so profound it settled deep in her bones. This was right. This was real. This was home. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Lysander, I will." His face broke into a radiant smile, and he surged forward, kissing her again, this time with a tenderness that spoke of relief and overwhelming joy. It was a kiss that sealed their future, a silent vow exchanged in the warm glow of the firelight. 3 months later, Ilara awoke to the soft morning light filtering through the tall windows of the royal bedchamber. The heavy velvet curtains, the color of a dawn sky, had been pulled back to reveal a breathtaking view of the capital city. For a moment, as she did every morning, she felt a flicker of disbelief. Then she felt the heavy, warm arm draped possessively around her waist, and the steady breathing against her hair, and she smiled. She turned carefully in Lysander's arms to face him. He was still asleep, his stern face softened, his black hair a messy tangle on the white linen pillow. In sleep, he looked younger, the weight of his crown temporarily lifted. She reached out and gently traced the line of his jaw, her heart swelling with a love so vast it sometimes felt it would burst from her chest. He had been true to his word. He had not asked her to change. Instead, he had given her the space and the encouragement to become more herself than she had ever been. He celebrated her quiet nature, calling it a peaceful harbor in the stormy sea of court life. He listened to her ideas, valuing her perspective on everything from state dinners to agricultural policy. She was no longer invisible. She was invaluable. Her days were full. She had taken over the restoration of the palace's long-neglected glass conservatories. Under her care, forgotten exotic flowers bloomed again, filling the air with their perfume. The staff, who had initially been wary of her, now adored her. She knew all their names, their children's names, their small joys and sorrows. She had started a small school within the castle walls for their children, teaching them to read and write herself 2 afternoons a week. Her laughter, once a rare and fragile thing, was now bright and frequent, echoing in hallways that had been silent for too long. Lysander stirred, his dark eyes fluttering open. He smiled when he saw her watching him, a slow, sleepy smile that was reserved only for her. "Good morning, my queen," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "You smell of sunshine. And you smell of king," she teased gently, her fingers tangling in his hair. They lay like that for a long while, simply breathing together, content in the quiet intimacy that had become the bedrock of their life. Later that day, as Alara was arranging a bouquet of moon orchids in the study, a royal page delivered a single letter on a silver tray. The wax seal was unfamiliar, a simple S. Her brow furrowed as she broke it. The handwriting was a looping, dramatic scrawl she recognized instantly. It was from Seraphina. Her hand trembled slightly as she unfolded the heavy parchment. "Sister," it began, "I do not know if you will even read this. I would not blame you if you threw it into the fire. I know that an apology is a paltry thing after a lifetime of cruelty. There is no excuse for how Mother and I treated you. We were poisoned by ambition and jealousy. We saw your quiet strength not as a virtue, but as a judgment on our own shallow lives, and we hated you for it. Our lives are different now. We live in a small cottage in the country. Our titles are gone. Our wealth is gone. Mother weeps all day. At first, I was filled with nothing but rage, but in the silence, with nothing to distract me, I have been forced to look at myself. I did not like what I saw. I see you sometimes, in the city gazettes. They call you the Sunlight Queen. They write of your kindness, of the school you have started. They write of the way the king looks at you. He looks at you as though you are the only person in the world. You deserve that happiness, Alara. You always did. I was just too blind to see it. I do not ask for your forgiveness. I have not earned it. I only write to say that I am sorry, and that I hope you are happy. Seraphina." Alara read the letter twice. 3 months ago, these words would have brought a storm of emotion, anger, vindication, perhaps even a bitter triumph. Now, she felt only a quiet, distant pity. Seraphina and her mother were figures from another life, ghosts from a story that was no longer hers. Their chapter was closed. She walked over to the fireplace where a low fire still burned, and she dropped the letter into the flames. She watched as the parchment curled, blackened, and turned to ash, the words of the past dissolving into nothing. She felt a presence behind her, and then strong arms wrapped around her waist. Lysander rested his chin on her shoulder, his warmth seeping into her back. "What was that?" he asked softly, his eyes on the dying flames. "A message from a ghost," she replied, leaning back into his embrace. "It's gone now." He said nothing more, understanding that she had let go of the last anchor tethering her to her old life. He simply held her, his love a silent, unshakable fortress around her. "I love you," he murmured into her hair, his voice filled with a quiet awe, as if he still couldn't believe she was real. She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to cup his face. She looked into his dark, devoted eyes, and she saw her past, her present, and her future. She saw the man who had found her in the shadows, and had not tried to pull her into his light, but had shown her how to ignite her own. "I know," she whispered, a radiant smile spreading across her face. "And I love you." She rose on her toes and kissed him, a kiss not of claiming or desperation, but of pure, blissful belonging. It was a kiss that tasted of sunshine and jasmine and the promise of 1,000 happy tomorrows. It was the kiss of a woman who was finally, completely home.